Welcome back. A woman you might know all too well decided to speak now. Shortly after the debate ended, music superstar Taylor Swift announced her support for the Democratic ticket, a move Harris's campaign aides say caught them off guard, actually. Swift posting on Instagram, quote, "I'm voting for Kamala Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them. I believe we can accomplish so much more in this country if we are led by calm and not chaos." The 34-year-old singer signed her post "Childless Cat Lady." That, of course, is a reference to J.D. Vance's previous comments about women who don't have children. Trump seemed to try to shake it off this morning on Fox News, saying that he was not a fan of Swift and that she would likely, quote, pay a price in the marketplace. The endorsement comes as NBC News polling shows that Harris leading Trump 50% to 34% among Gen Z voters. But that number is lower than the 60% of young voters Biden won back in 2020. And that's according to NBC News exit polls. Joining me now is Melissa Deckman, CEO of PRRI, a nonpartisan organization that researches America's culture and politics. She is out with a new book, The Politics of Gen Z, How the Youngest Voters Will Shape Our Democracy. Melissa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So many people are buzzing about this endorsement. Usually we don't spend so much time talking about an endorsement, but obviously Taylor Swift has hundreds of millions of followers. We have seen her concerts impact the U.S. economy. So, of course, the question is how and to what extent could she actually impact this election? Do you think that this will sway younger voters?
I think when the most famous childless cat lady in America decides to endorse you, I think it's probably a good thing for any campaign. I do think with Taylor Swift, though, she's probably going to, I think, help the cause for the Harris campaign because she's shown in the past an ability to get young people to register to vote. And I think, too, if you look back in 2020, she did endorse Joe Biden, but a lot of things have changed in the last 4 years. We suddenly have, for example, more Gen Z voters in the electorate. And so estimates are suggesting up to 8 million more voters actually are going to be eligible to vote. And so I think she really could have a very influential impact on some of those voters, especially young women.
Well, just to follow up on that, I mean, how much of an impact it's hard to quantify, I realize, but to what extent is it thought that she impacted Joe Biden's campaign back in 2020?
Well, you know, as you mentioned, Joe Biden did very well with young voters. And so it's, again, hard to kind of delineate specifically her impact. But I will say this. So last year, in a non-election year, she encouraged her followers to register to vote. And there was a spike in voter registration. Like, I think more than 30,000 of her fans decided to register in 2023. So if you think about now in 2024, with a very highly publicized election that many people, including lots of young people, are talking about, I think it could essentially really help the Harris campaign.
Let's zoom out a little bit and talk about celebrity endorsements, broadly speaking. Historically, what has their impact been on campaigns? Do they make a big difference?
Well, I think the data show that most Americans don't rely on celebrity endorsements to decide how they're going to vote. But I will say this. There was a poll earlier this year that USA Today put out, and they asked about the role of influencers, including Taylor Swift. And they found that 1 in 10 women, 1 in 10 independent voters, and about 1 in 10 voters under the age of 35 said that her endorsement would actually influence their vote choice. Again, it's not a majority of voters, but in an election where it's going to matter at the margins in these battleground states, I think it certainly helps. It doesn't hurt the Harris campaign.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the gender gap, because sort of similarly to what we're discussing, there is a gender gap, and yet still not as big as back in 2020. So the challenge for Vice President Kamala Harris, if she wants to win, is to try to garner more votes. What does the national gender gap echo what we're seeing in the Gen Z gender gap?
Oh, there's actually a wider gender gap among Generation Z. If you look at the last election in the midterms in 2022, 72% of Gen Z women voted for Democrats in House races, whereas about 54% of Gen Z men. And some polling is showing that we can expect that Gen Z women, I think, are going to turn out heavily in favor of Kamala Harris. I think with Gen Z men, it's still a little bit mixed. Some recent polling has shown that she's doing better with young men of color. I think younger white men are probably probably more poised to vote for Trump at this point in the election.
And obviously what we're talking about largely today is the debate. How does Gen Z watch? How do they process the debate? Are they tuning in to an event like that?
They're watching it on streaming services, not on television. So I think we don't really know necessarily how many Gen Zers are watching. But, you know, I have Gen Zers in my family and I talk to them, and I think that they were left with the impression that Trump was unhinged, that he was not answering questions directly. And so I do think that many Zoomers are looking for information about politics, and they're getting it increasingly online and also through streaming platforms.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see. It'll also just be fascinating to see if she gets out and campaigns for Vice President Harris, if she performs, for example. Melissa Deckman, thanks so much. Great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.